Director of Operations and Programming at the Palace Theatre for Western Rhode Cultural Trust. Thank you for joining us today to commemorate our theater's 94th anniversary virtual tour. We'd like to start by giving you some background information about how the theater was built, the history of Greensburg and the performing arts, so you have a better understanding of from where we've come in the last 94 plus years. The performing arts started in this area in 1880 on the site of our present courtyard, where the Lawmanson Opera House was built in 1880 by Dr. Henry Lawmanson, a doctor who had a home on the corner of West Otterman Street and North Pennsylvania Avenue. He was a fan of the performing arts and wanted an opera house here, right next to his home. Over the years, the theater evolved into a skating rink and a boxing arena. Upon Dr. Lawmanson's death in 1895, ownership was transferred to his nephew, James Keagy, and it was renamed the Keagy Theater. By 1917, it was renamed the Strand Theater and expanded in seating capacity as vaudeville was just beginning to take a stronghold in the region. That was key because Dr. Lawmanson's home had also evolved in the early 1900s into two different hotels, the Tavern Hotel and the Kunkel Hotel. By 1920, that home had been transformed into the Rialto Theater, a 520-seat theater that accommodated the vaudeville shows of the day, in addition to the Strand Theater next to it. Michael Manos of the Manos family was involved with the management of the Strand Theater. He and his brothers had a vision to expand and purchase the whole surrounding block here so that they could morph the Rialto Theater into the larger Manos Theater. In 1924, they bought up the block and they started redeveloping the Rialto Theater and transforming it into the Manos Theater that opened on September 2nd, 1926, seating 2,100 and 3,600 people, a tremendous increase from our current capacity of only 1,369. So as the Manos Theater opened on opening night, they had two performances with over 5,000 guests attending, two different shows. The shows ran over 4 hours in length, including 1 hour of organ music by an organist, Harold Lipman. It involved an animal act with trained dogs, cats, pigeons, and rabbits. And it also involved a feature film. They didn't call them silent films at that point because they never knew they'd be anything but silent films. So they called them feature films. And the show here on opening night was Young April by the Cecil B. DeMille Studios. By 1929, talking pictures had evolved. But the onset of the Depression was also looming, and business and vaudeville in general took a sharp nosedive as citizens from all over the country started enjoying movies with words in them. So as things got to be a little dire for the Manos family, and that family encompassed brothers of Michael Manos and a cousin, Michael had 2/7 of a share of ownership of the theater. They sold out the theater in 1930 to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was one of the predominant movie theaters of the day. And in that period, it was not uncommon for movie theaters, movie companies, movie production companies to own and build theaters. You had the Grands, the Paramounts, the MGM theaters, and the Warner Brothers theaters. Warner Brothers owned this theater from 1930 to 1973, with still having live entertainment here and there, but predominantly movies. By 1973, it was sold to Cinemet Theaters in Pittsburgh. They held on to it for only 4 years because by that point, suburban multiplexes had started sprawling up in the suburbs, and a big downtown theater was less desirable. In 1977, Cinemet Theaters sold out to two local business people, Adelaide Del Vito and Carl Marinelli. A year later, Miss Del Vito sold back her share to Carl Marinelli as the sole proprietor, and he and his wife Judy were the stewards of this lovely facility and renamed it the Palace Theater. As Judy Marinelli told us, she thought it looked like a palace. So they renamed it from the Manos to the Palace Theater, approximately 1977. So it became a lovely venue for the return of the performing arts, with a number of acts taking place in the day, including Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine, the Oak Ridge Boys, Mel Tillis, Tammy Wynette, Dr. Hook. By the late 1980s, Mr. Marinelli wanted to retire to Florida. He was leaving the theater in the hands of some people to manage it for him. Unfortunately, he passed away very unexpectedly at the young age of 62. At that point, his family back in Westmoreland County was not interested in continuing the operations of the theater. They had other business interests of their own. So the theater was put up for sale. At first, it was thought that the theater might be demolished to make way for a parking garage or a Chuck E. Cheese pizza parlor, perhaps. But some citizens in Greensburg, city council, and the mayor rallied with some other philanthropic business folk in town to save the theater and keep it as a performing arts center. By 1990, the Marinelli estate sold the building to Greensburg Garden Civic Center, which was then a division of city government, and some preliminary upgrades were done to plumbing and wiring systems. Just a few years later, it was recognized that by forming a nonprofit organization, we would be better eligible to apply for funding streams and support from corporations and foundations. That was the beginning of the Westmoreland Trust in 1992. Future renovations in the mid-90s included upgrades to lighting and sound systems so that we could bring in a higher caliber of shows onto the stage. By 2004, it was thought that the name Westmoreland Trust didn't accurately depict our whole mission. So we incorporated the name Westmoreland Cultural Trust to better identify the true purpose of our mission in preserving the performing arts and being a cultural driver for the region. Over the last 30 years, more than $15 million has been put into the theater in various phases of renovations by the Cultural Trust, including upgrades to air conditioning, an elevator to service the upper levels of the theater, improvements to the dressing rooms backstage to put in new carpeting, counters, mirrors, lights, and ceilings. Thank you for joining us for this first episode of our virtual tour. Join us next week as we explore the Megan Suite and lobby areas.